it was the biggest move of my life at that time for sure. Moving away from my family was really scary. I'm very close with my parents and my granddad, and it was actually the best thing I've ever done in my life. And it actually brought my dad and me closer. So our relationship really improved from that. Just having some space from the people you love and you're around all the time is a really good thing. And it gave me the courage to be really independent. And I said, once I did that, I felt like I could do so much more. So it really opened the world to me.
Hello to all the dreamers and risk takers out there. Wannabes, I see you too, and I got you. This is the Vereless N podcast, where we help people take risks, overcome fears, and experience freedom. Hi, I'm Heather, the host of this podcast. I'm also a risk taker, adventurer, van lifer, world traveler, business owner, Enneagram 9 peacemaker, student in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, connector, daughter of Christ, and encourager to all the dreamers and wannabes out there. This is the Vereless N podcast, and we have meaningful conversations with people who took risks in pursuit of their dreams to discover how they did it. Whether they've started a business, traveled solo, moved to a new state or country, chose an alternative lifestyle, or started a new hobby, these people have one thing in common. They decided their dreams were bigger than their fears. Hey guys, welcome to the Vereless N podcast. This is your host, Heather. I am so excited about today's episode. I am joined by Lisa, one of my best friends. She is a travel blogger, foodie, world traveler, travel consultant, luxury travel consultant, and a previous Expedia local expert, concierge in Hawaii. Hello, Lisa. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Heather. Hola.
Hola. So, Lisa, right now, tell me where you're living.
We are living in Mexico. So we've been here for 2 months and we'll be here for 3 months total. We're in a little town called Bucerías, which is about 40 minutes north of Puerto Vallarta.
That is amazing. And Lisa is not from Mexico. Lisa, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're from, your background? Just tell us a little bit about you.
Yes. Well, I always, this is my favorite question. I feel like I'm a child of the world, just like you, Heather. I say I'm from Hawaii because that's where I identify most of my childhood and growing up. My family from my mom's side is from there. Lived in California for a while, but I don't really identify so much with that place. And most recently live in Seattle. So spent about 11 years in Hawaii and been in Seattle for about 5 years.
Nice. I love it. Okay, so a little bit of a background story to how I met Lisa. I had
I love this story.
So I had just moved to Hawaii, like literally bought a one-way ticket and was there for maybe 2 weeks before I decided to just show up solo on my own to the beach volleyball courts at Fort DeRussy, kind of scoping it out, like, how do I want to get into this game I want to play? Like, what's the dynamic of everybody? And this bubbly girl just comes over, and like, usually I'm the one to introduce myself first. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, are you new?" "I'm Lisa. Do you want to play with us?" And "What's your name? Where are you from? Tell me everything about you."
Yep.
And that's how it all started. And we've been like besties ever since, lived on the same street in Hawaii for a while. And I've had the pleasure to see Lisa become this risk taker. She moved to a new state in Washington, far from her family in Hawaii. And you just took that risk to move to a new state. And through that move, I've just seen you blossom, like personally. And it's been such a joy to see that, because you really have just come alive. Lisa, what are some of your biggest passions, and how did those start?
Oh my gosh. Well, first I have to say, Heather, like you were such an early inspiration for me. Like, talk about Vereless and Free. You embody that completely. Here you are. I don't know how old we were, like 22, 23, maybe younger. I don't even remember. But I was like, wait, you worked on a yacht and wait, you moved from North Carolina to Hawaii by yourself? What? And I was so inspired because I had not yet grown into the person I am today back then. And you were just such a huge part of that. So I love that story of how we met. I love that you took a risk and went to a volleyball court by yourself in a new place and made new friends. So that's so
Thanks,
great.
Lise.
Yeah. So what are some of my biggest passions? Gosh, they've morphed over time. I would say like back when, when we were in Hawaii, it was definitely yoga. I was a yoga instructor and I did yoga like twice a day and I did yoga poses in every single photo. It was obnoxious.
Yeah, I
And
remember having to take quite a few of those.
yep, yep. And
Wait,
then
wait. Get the
what?
perfect background and
Wait, the
the perfect
dancer's
lighting.
pose.
Yes.
Oh, and
One
funny,
more on top of this beautiful mountain.
funny side story for that, Heather. You were the one who encouraged me to save money to buy my first pair of Lululemon shorts, which were like $65, which
Wait,
at the
wait.
time I was like, there's no way I would afford that. Oh,
Wait,
how
are
we've
you sure
changed.
it's Lululemon or is it Lululemon?
Lululemon.
Lisa has this way of making she just speaks foreign languages so beautifully. And Lululemon is definitely in a foreign language, right? So it became
Totally.
Lululemon.
Lemon. Yeah, but I would say, oh, and before that it was musical theater, but I would say that throughout my life, the passion that has stayed very constant is travel, in my family. So traveling, I have traveled my whole life, but not really, deeply and meaningfully. I went to Hawaii a lot as a child, and that was great. But in terms of travel, I didn't really take my first trip until I was in university and I was 19 years old, and my family took me on a cruise throughout Europe, and Spain was my favorite country. And that's kind of what started my wanderlust. And I started just dreaming about travel and how I could continue traveling throughout my life from there.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you also studied abroad, right?
I did not study abroad. That was a dream
Okay,
of mine.
gotcha.
Yeah, I wish I did, but I did not make that happen.
For some reason, I thought you did, but maybe it was just that trip with your parents to Europe.
Mhm.
And so, would you say moving to Washington state was a big risk for you at that time?
I wouldn't say it was a big risk, but it was a huge move. I had never moved away from my family. My family moved a lot when I was young, so I was, comfortable and familiar with the concept of picking up and moving to a new place and starting over. Um, and that really excited me. But the thing about this move was that I was so comfortable in Hawaii. I was, making a really good salary with Expedia as a concierge. I had amazing friends. I lived right down the street from you. I had my family, and it's not that I was unhappy. That's the thing is a lot of people when they move somewhere, it comes from this like I need to escape, I need to get away, right? But something my dad always says is make sure you're always moving to something, running towards something, not away from something. And so I saw this as an opportunity for me to grow. I just feel like Hawaii is amazing. It's a great place to live. But after a while, it just feels really small. And so I felt like it was time for me to, get a not a big girl move, but just a different career, bigger mountains to climb, more seasons, and just allowing myself to be vulnerable. So it was the biggest move of my life at that time for sure. Moving away from my family was really scary. I'm very close with my parents and my granddad, and it was actually the best thing I've ever done in my life. And it actually brought my dad and me closer. So our relationship really improved from that. Just having some space from the people you love and you're around all the time is a really good thing. And it gave me the courage to be really independent. And I said, once I did that, I felt like I could do so much more. So it really opened
Mm.
the world to me.
I absolutely love that. I love that quote from your dad too. Just
Yes.
not to, I totally agree. A lot of times people are like, so why are you here? You just
Mhm.
decided to move here. What changed? What happened? And
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be like that. You can always have dreams to chase after. And I love
exactly.
that. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, in that transition from Hawaii to Seattle, you said that wanted to start this new life. Were there specific goals you had in that? Because I know from living in Hawaii that sometimes it's a little bit hard to find a man who
Yes,
actually is going to stay in
ma'am.
Hawaii, you know?
Yes, absolutely. I
The
had
dating scene is not there's just not a big pool to choose from, let's put it that way.
exactly. Yes, not a huge diverse pool to choose from. Yeah, I had three main goals in moving to Seattle. One was to get my yoga certification to become a yoga instructor. The second was to hike as many mountains as I could and enjoy the seasons. And the third was to find a husband. And that
Dang,
I
girl.
did. Let me tell you, when I want something, I will go after it.
But also, I kinda, like, stood beside you in that journey,
You did.
physically in Hawaii and
Mhm.
from afar after the move, and sometimes when you tell people that you've accomplished these goals or done these things, it seems like such a huge thing to them, but really there's little steps that
Mhm.
lead you there. Obviously, you didn't move to Washington and just get married within 5 minutes. Like that kind of took time for you
Right.
to meet your husband Sasha, and I'd love to hear we'll talk about how those steps in a little bit, but how did you plan for making that move? I know Lisa is a very organized person and she loves to plan. So I know a spreadsheet is always a part of her planning for whatever it is. Can you tell me and the listeners a little bit about how you planned for the move, whether it was like financially, making some sort of spreadsheet we should all know about, or
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
logistics? Yeah.
Sure, yeah, and Heather, I will say you were such a pivotal part of that move because I mean, you were with me through the whole thing, the whole, dreaming. I dreamed about going to so many different places, and I was really between Colorado and Seattle, and I chose Seattle because there's water there. It's a little bit closer to home, and just a little bit more diversity in terms of the environment and the surroundings. And I
Yeah. I
remember,
remember
uh-huh,
Well, I remember real quick you telling me about your dreams, like, "I
hmm
wanna move to Colorado and I wanna move to Washington," and
You're like, "I
and
will
I was
believe it when I see a plane ticket."
exactly. I'm like, "I fully support you, but girl, you just need to buy that plane ticket," you know? Like,
Exactly.
'cause sometimes for me, there's only so much planning you can really do before you actually get there
That's
because
right.
a lot of
Yeah.
the times you can't control what's gonna happen when you arrive, so you just hurry up and get there. That's what I do.
Heather,
So tell
that's
me what you
exactly
do.
right. Yeah, that's exactly right, and I was gonna say, for your listeners, I think and also a magnet that you gave me a long time ago said, "Don't follow your dreams, chase them." And I still have that
Mm.
magnet on my refrigerator in Ballard, in our home in Seattle. And I love that because, it's wonderful to be a dreamer. I hope everyone is a dreamer, right? But there's only so much dreaming you can do. If you never act on your dreams, that's all you will ever be. And so implementing and just taking a step towards fulfilling that dream and realizing that dream is so imperative. And so I remember when I when I told you, I was like, "Heather, I got a job and I bought a ticket." And I think we cried because you're like, "Oh my gosh, finally." So what some of the steps that I took to make this happen. Yes, I'm very, very detailed. I created essentially a business plan for moving, which I got from my parents.
Only you.
Right. So I
Thanks,
created,
Dad.
right. I created a pros and cons checklist between the differences between living in Hawaii and living in Seattle. to kind of
Buying a
see.
whole new wardrobe.
Yeah, that is one of them for sure. Yeah, it's not cheap to live there. I'll say that. I think half of my paycheck in the first few years went to REI to equip myself with the new cold. Yeah, I came up with that list of pros and cons because for me it's just really helpful to see everything written out, so I can sort of balance and see what are realistically what it's like there. And I remember, during slow periods at work, I would Google what it's really like to live in Seattle. And I've actually since written a blog post on that.
I
But
love that.
just getting, reading forums and reading from people who actually, moved there from other places and what they feel like, what they feel it is to live there gives you a realistic perspective. And then financially, I put together a detailed spreadsheet of how much money I had in savings because I was quite prepared to move without a job. I was really ready, and I had a good savings pad. And so I was prepared to move there, and I needed to know how many, for how much time I could live on not having an income whilst looking for a job. So luckily, I ended up finding one and didn't have to go that route. But it is very helpful, especially if you're someone who is a little bit nervous about finances when you make a move. That's a big move. You need to understand how much rents are in the area. If you're going to buy, how much are homes going for in the area? Really, what is the cost of living like in the place that you're going to? And so another thing I did was a comparison of cost of living expenses in Hawaii versus Seattle, and it turns out they're actually quite similar. There are some things that are more expensive in Seattle and vice versa in Hawaii, but it ends up being pretty comparable. If you're making a move from, say, New York City to Kansas City, right, that's going to look very different. So understanding the finances of the place that you're moving to is really helpful.
I love that. That's a really good idea. Googling what it's like to actually live there. I've
Yeah,
never done that.
there's a lot of good blog posts about that. I actually shameless plug, I have one on Hawaii as well. So if any of your listeners are moving to Hawaii or Seattle, I got you covered there. But there's a lot of good, even TripAdvisor forums that have good conversations about what it's like to live in a new place.
Yeah, that's great. One of the things I wanted to ask you is you were doing this planning to move there and had researched and done your spreadsheets. Were there any obstacles that came in your way or things that were thrown at you that could have been a setback, that could have been a sign I'm not supposed to go? Did anything like that happen that can you share any stories?
I'm smiling because no, there was not a single thing that showed me that this was not the right move. Like, I know, Heather, you believe in this, and I believe that everything happens for a reason, and there is
Yes.
a certain path that once you make a decision and you're on that path, whether you believe in God or the universe or whatever your higher power is, it has a way of stepping in and showing you you are in the right place. This is
Yeah.
what you're meant to be doing. And I
Yeah.
remember I was working at the Outrigger Reef in Waikiki, and my guests were from all over the world, as you remember. And once I decided I was moving to Seattle, once I made that mental switch, even before I had lined anything up or a job or anything, I just made that commitment in my head, and I said, "Lisa, you are going to move to Seattle by August of I don't remember the year, but whatever that was." And once I made that commitment to myself, I saw everything like physically line up into place for me. And I had guests from Seattle, like all the next like 3 weeks, I had guests from Seattle more than I had ever had before. And I was like, this is a sign, this is great.
It's
So
so fun how that happens when
it
all the doors
is
open, and then
exactly.
you probably had guests like that from Seattle before,
I
but
just didn't
once
yeah, I just didn't
yeah,
notice. Yep, exactly.
exactly.
Yep. So I really didn't feel like there were any obstacles that were thrown my way. I would just say that once I moved there, uh, this is a little tip is that wherever you're planning on moving, make sure you understand the traffic because I looked up where I was going to be living, which was Everett, and it was like 20, 25 minutes in Google Maps, but I didn't look at it during traffic times. And that 25 minutes can easily turn into an hour and 25 minutes. So that was one thing that I kind of missed, where I was like, I really wanted to be close to Seattle, and I ended up really, really far away in a place that didn't even feel like being near the city. So that was kind of a bummer. But I ended up staying at that job only for 6 months because it just wasn't a good fit. But it enabled me to get my foot in the door in Washington State. And then I found my dream job very shortly after that and moved into the city.
Yeah, that's such a good tip. I love that. Yeah. Make
Yeah,
sure
make sure you
you
look at all hours
adjust
of the
for
day.
traffic. Yeah. And I know for you, moving wasn't because of a career. Yes, you wanted to develop yourself
Mhm.
professionally, but also it was more a lifestyle, right?
Exactly.
The being
Yeah,
in the mountains and being close to the water. I think that's like such a huge thing that a lot of people just don't really do, right? Moving to pursue a lifestyle, but in my mind, that's what we have. That's our life, you know? And
exactly.
and so I'm just super proud of you for you found a job before you went there, right? You found a job and
Mhm.
that was the job that you worked for 6 months.
Mhm.
But it was more just a way to get there and get on your
Mhm.
feet and kind of explore. Did you do any trips to Seattle, quote unquote, scouting trips before you actually moved? Because sometimes that could be helpful, and
I
sometimes you
did.
can totally do it without doing that, like when I moved
Yeah,
to Hawaii.
exactly. I know, that's what I was just gonna say. Yeah, you moved sight unseen. I think for some place like Hawaii, that's totally fine.
It's
Hawaii's
tropical
paradise,
paradise.
right? I did. Yeah, I did. I took 3 trips to Seattle, one in each quarter to figure out what was winter like, spring, summer, and decided that it was a good move. So yeah, definitely. I'm just a quick go back to what you were saying about moving for lifestyle. That is single-handedly, I think what has shaped my life is uh, I'm not going to say that a career is not important to me, but my lifestyle is more important to me than a career. My career has always followed my lifestyle, not the other way around. And I'm very, very lucky to have a husband who lives that very same way and has those same values in life. And everything has fallen into place because of my lifestyle, not because of my career. And so I will always choose a lifestyle choice over moving somewhere miserable for a job because those are my priorities. Not everyone is like that, and that's completely fine. If you want to move for a job, that's great. But I would say if you move to that place and you're not intrinsically happy, you have so many other options. And I want to bring up now, if it's okay with you, Heather, once I met my now husband, at the time partner, when we decided to leave our careers in Seattle in 2017 to travel abroad for half a year, that was definitely a lifestyle move as well. And that was, after moving to Seattle, that was the biggest pinnacle of my life and of our life together, my husband. And he actually proposed during that trip in Greece, and we ended up getting married in the same place. And you were there back in
Yeah, and I remember you
2018.
calling me after he proposed on the beach. I'm like,
Yes.
"Oh my gosh, yes." Yes,
You were the first
definitely.
person I called after my mom. But
I'll
yeah.
let her have that one. It's okay.
Yeah, but that was just incredible. Like, talk about that was risky. We left everything. We left our apartments, we put our belongings in storage, we sold most everything else, and we put our life into 2 65-liter backpacks, and we took off on a journey that changed our lives. And we have never looked back. We've never regretted anything except for maybe coming back a little too early. I would have liked to
Yeah.
stay longer,
Well,
but
one thing is I remember you calling me and telling me, well, first of all, when you met Sasha, you told me about him and I was just super happy for you. Being friends with you for quite a while, I understand your personality and what it's like to be around you and how sometimes your mind can get the best of you, right? You like to be in control. And
mhm.
sometimes it's better to go with the flow, especially
Definitely.
on a trip around the world. I've
Yeah.
done traveling around the world where you just can't plan every detail. And
Mhm.
even if you do, you might meet somebody along the way and they'll be like, oh, we just went to this place, spent 3 weeks there. It was amazing. And that wasn't on your itinerary, but
Mhm.
maybe you can move it around and go check that place out. When you told me about this around the world trip, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm so excited. And then you're telling me how you're planning out like almost every detail. All
Good luck
right,
with
good
that.
luck.
And I
But
will
then, like,
say
as you did it, I remember you telling me, Sasha's so good for me. He seems to be a little bit more free in that
yep.
aspect. And so, yeah, tell me a little bit about your control and how making these moves and taking these risks has maybe changed that along the way.
Yes, oh my gosh, and this is almost actually a better example than Seattle. I would say Seattle was such a big move for me because I was still, single. I was an independent woman, and that was the biggest decision that I had made in my single life. And then, you know,
Right.
once
And that
I
was the first step, right?
exactly, yes, and
You
I
know,
would
it
not
was
have
like
mhm,
getting you there, building your confidence in yourself,
mhm.
and really establishing who you are as a person, independent of everyone else in your life, you know?
Exactly. Yep, exactly. And that's where I met Sasha. So had I not moved to Seattle, I would not be here living in Mexico, married to the man of my dreams right now. So everything, yeah, everything kind of falls into place and acts as a stepping stone towards the next big thing in your life. But yeah, just leaving everything to travel. I really looked so much to you, Heather, for that because you have done that so many times. And it was so scary. I remember we actually drove from Seattle to Moab to hang out in the national park for a bit and then to Boulder. And then we flew off to Ecuador. And I remember that first night sleeping in a different place that was not my home. And I was like, what did we just do?
I love that feeling.
I know it was this like terrifying anxiety feeling that gripped me. And after that first night, it was like this weight was just lifted off of not my shoulders, but my whole body, and I felt light for the first
Mm,
time in years. I was so unhappy in Seattle. I think just personally, like the weather in Seattle is not ideal for my lifestyle, hence why we are in Mexico. And that's fine. Seattle's just an amazing place, but it just was at that time it wasn't the right place for me to be. And so I finally felt like I was in a good spot. And once we got on the road, like Heather, yeah, I planned probably the first 2 months, I think, of that trip, and everything went mostly to plan, except for a few hiccups here and there, like Sasha's Russian passport expiring and him getting stuck in Latvia and having to take a 10-hour bus to St. Petersburg. But you know, those are part
oh,
of
no. That is one thing. Check your passport before you
yes.
go internationally, and also make sure you have it with you, even if it is good.
Precisely. And we had done so much to plan for this trip. And he's a dual citizen. So his American passport was completely fine. That's the only one we had checked. We forgot to check his Russian passport. So, yeah, if you're a
Those
dual
dual
citizen,
citizens.
if you're a dual citizen, check both passports. I think, Heather, in like 2 months is probably the time it took me to really let go. And I felt so free after those 2 months. I actually ended up loving not knowing where we would go next and just talking to people and getting their input. And I remember, I think I called you, Heather, from Baños, Ecuador, and I was just having a day. I could not snap out of this funk. And I was like, what is wrong with me? Why am I so angry? Like, why am I so in such a sour mood? I'm in this amazing country. I'm traveling the world. Like, why am I being so yucky today? And you're like, Lisa, have grace with yourself. Like you are traveling is taxing on the mind, on the body. And yes, that is an incredibly privileged thing to be able to say. When you're traveling, when you're living abroad, when you're moving to a new place, whether you're by yourself or with a partner, have grace, give yourself space to learn to grow. It's okay to have those days. It's okay to have those off days and just feel like total shit. Sorry if I can swear on your podcast.
It's totally
uh,
fine.
and that's totally part of what makes us whole, right? We can't experience those highs without experiencing the lows.
Mm, that's so beautiful. Yeah, I'm just thinking of that whole experience. It's just amazing. you had a plan to go for 6 months, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys both had corporate jobs. You had
Mhm.
worked at the Space Needle. Were you still
Mhm.
working at the Space? So Lisa worked at the Seattle Space Needle
Mhm.
and she was selling group tickets to the Space Needle,
Yeah,
I
I
think
was
it was.
tourism development sales manager and group sales, and then Sasha was a manager at Boeing. So we both worked for pretty iconic places. We made really, decent money, but we just
Yeah.
weren't happy. We just knew that there was so much more to life than a
Hmm.
cubicle with
Yes.
walls.
I totally agree. Gosh, how was Sasha with that? Was that a joint idea, or did one of you say to the other, we should travel the world for 6 months? Like, let's quit our jobs. Like, how did that transpire for you guys as a couple?
I love this story, and it's a story we will tell our children time and time again when we have kids. It's something I'll never forget. We were hiking at Ross Dam Lake in Washington up in the Cascades in June. It was just beautiful, very inspiring, location. And that's kind of always hiking is where we tend to have all our deep, meaningful life conversations. And that's kind of where we tend to inadvertently plan out, without planning to plan. We end up planning out the next sort of phase of our life,
That's your
because
dream spot.
it is. It's that, and sipping a mezcal in Mexico is probably a close second. But we were hiking, and we were just talking about our future and travel and how we could make this work. And we're like, gosh, we have 2 weeks off per year, which, by the way, is total BS. America
Oh,
has
I
it
totally
so
agree.
backwards, right? Like Australia
Look up
gives like
all the
two
countries in
months,
the world. Yeah.
right?
New Zealand basically takes off from Christmas to the end of January just because. Like,
Right. Yeah. So we were like, how are we going to make this work? And so he was like, well, what if we just quit our jobs and traveled on our savings? And I thought he was joking. I laughed. And I quickly learned he was quite serious. And I was like, oh, are you really? We could do that? And I started thinking about it, and I was like, gosh, we could do that. We have the means to do that. And so that's where that seed was planted. And instead of just dreaming it, we allowed that to kind of settle. And that evening, when we returned back to our place, we started putting plans into action. And from there, we came up with more of a detailed plan on, how much do we want to spend, how much do we need to save, how much time do we need to give our employers, what do we do with our homes, etc. So I came up with quite a detailed list of things that we needed to do, which is also on my blog, is how to plan for traveling long term.
did you say it was that night you went home and started planning?
Mhm.
I love it. You don't waste any time.
Yes, yes.
So, so good.
Oh, sorry, and Heather, one thing I wanna tell your readers that I have learned in this past year that I would love to pass on is what gets measured gets done. And I think it's so important, whether it's your net worth, your monthly income, your monthly expenditures, your budget, review all of that on a regular basis and put it in the calendar. So if you have, and this comes back to also to positive self-talk, which is something you and I talk about very frequently, and I love this topic. When you have something, whether it's an idea or a possibility or an opportunity that you want to explore, if you're serious about it, put it in the calendar. Make a date, set a date, and do something about it. Take that first step, because that first step is what's going to get you to your dream. And you have to start somewhere, even if it's the tiniest little implemented action. Tony Robbins calls it massive imperfect action. So just do something, and that'll get the ball rolling.
Yeah, I love that. For me, I'm the type of person who it can be a little bit hard to get the ball rolling in certain situations. And if I just make that one first move, it's kind of like ripping off the band aid, and then everything just is easier after that. Whether
Exactly.
that's telling your landlord you're moving out, even if you don't have a place set up to go to,
Hmm.
you've already given your notice. You're going. And
Exactly. You're
then
committed.
and then you start doing those other things that's going to put all the pieces in place to make that goal happen for you. I think doing the move to Seattle and then taking the trip with Sasha around the world, you guys have learned so much through it, right? Like you've learned your
Definitely.
where you go to keep dreaming. You guys support each other through that. And I think it's super important and really incredible that you found somebody who has those same dreams and
Mm.
aspirations, because he obviously dual citizen, multicultural background, Russian, grew up in the States
Mhm.
and spent a lot of time in Russia as well.
Mm.
That's huge. If that's like a huge part of your biggest passion, traveling in life, to be able to find somebody who shares that
Mhm.
is just going to keep opening those doors. You
Yeah,
know, it's just going to be easy. So, do you
absolutely.
think, what sort of lessons have you learned along the way that are now part of your decision making process when you want to take a risk or you have a dream you want to chase?
Yeah, I would say documentation is really key. So just whether it's just writing down what you're wanting to do, just having that on paper, having that in your journal or in your computer really helps solidify it and make it more concrete. And I would say a huge aspect to being able to realize your dreams is understanding what you already have, and this goes into financials, and that is so important. And I think people in America do not speak about money enough. It's such a taboo topic, and it shouldn't be. It's not, finances are not taught in school the way they should be. And so I think it's really important to have your finances in good order if you want to do something like make a move or travel the world or quit your job. It's great to do things on a whim, but you also want to make sure that you have the support lined up for that. And it's also really helpful to have a community. So, right now in Mexico, for example, we're part of, I don't know, 8 or 10 expat groups, right? Expats in Mexico, expats in Puerto Vallarta. And it's so helpful to bounce ideas off of other people, see what other people are doing, meet up with these like minded people. And it really helps kind of get the creative juices flowing to allow you to continue dreaming your dream, but also realize that dream. And you can also interview people along the way of what did they do so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, two things I want to ask you about finances. Some people like numbers and finance, like it's not their first language,
Right.
like it doesn't come easy to them.
Hmm.
So, when you say like take a look at your finances, can you give some practical tips on what that actually looks like or where you would recommend going to get advice? I know you may have a few blogs that you've written about it. What sort of resources can you give for somebody who is just like, I've got money in the bank, maybe.
Yeah,
Now what?
definitely. Definitely. I think I read somewhere that something like 75% of Americans don't have more than 2 month supply of savings. And that's really scary. But that's exactly right, is we're just not educated on it. There's a lot of blogs out there like I think it's Mr. Money Mustache. Something like that is he's got a really good blog. But also I use Mint, and Mint tracks your expenses. So if you link all of your bank accounts to Mint, it will track what you're spending each month, and that's a really really useful tool. I also create a spreadsheet for a budget, and so I keep our budget, and that's a percentage of our expenditures each month we dedicate to groceries, eating out, entertainment. So whatever it is in your life that you have expenditures, whether that's rent or a mortgage or a car payment. So have that, and then also tracking your income is really important. So I always put those side by side so you can see how much are you spending and how much are you earning and how much are you saving each month. One thing that Sasha and I have recently done is every month we contribute 2% of our income to a charitable organization, and we contribute 10% to investments. So an investment can either be saving up to buy a property, whether that's real estate or an index fund or stocks and bonds, etc. And so having that every month we are accountable for that. That means we are accumulating our wealth every single month without even really having to think about it, because it is just a percentage of our income. So the higher our income is, the higher our investments are.
That's really smart. And sometimes you can have that stuff set up automatically
Hmm.
within your own bank account. So
Hmm.
if you do that 10%, you can just have it moved, or you set a reminder on your phone to say, "Hey, today's the day that I need to move this to this account because this much is going to be put into my Roth."
Hmm.
That's something that I do.
Absolutely.
And just having those spreadsheets. So that's super helpful. Thank you.
Hmm.
You talked about community and that you're a part of different expat groups, and that's huge as well for surrounding yourself with like-minded people in the place that you're at. And I know there's some online groups that you can kind of bounce ideas off of, because for me, when I remember when you were moving to Seattle, I didn't really know too many people there,
Mhm.
and you're like, what did you do? And I'm like, I met you at the volleyball court because I love volleyball. It's like if you go and participate, while it can be scary at first,
Mhm.
to just show up by yourself. But if you go and participate in these things that you already know you like, you're probably going to meet other people who like those same things. So,
Absolutely.
how do you find those communities? Like, I think that's really cool that you're a part of those groups. How did you find those?
Yeah, so I would say in the US meetup.com is great, and then Facebook is fantastic for better or for worse. It's really good for groups like this. And we just kind of met people in cafes and they're like, "Oh, join this group." And so that's kind of how we got into it. But you can also, if you're planning on moving really anywhere, you could look up in Facebook, just search, meetup groups in that city or meetup groups in that country, and a lot will pop up. So that's, yeah, just a really great way. And then once you join those groups, you of course you meet more people, and then they tell you about even more groups, and so your network and your community starts to quickly expand.
Yeah, that's something that I've found too, is that just travelers in general have just a very open mind, and they know what it's
Definitely.
like to be new in a
And
place, right?
vulnerable. Yeah, right.
Yeah, so they're very open to meeting new people all the
Mhm.
time. So if you have that in common with somebody, it's pretty easy to make friends with them, especially
Yeah.
abroad. So, yeah, just having that open mind to meeting new people while you're abroad. Obviously, if you're a solo female traveler, that may look a little bit different, or you might need to be like a little more cautious
Mhm.
in terms of where and how you meet people.
Mhm.
I've found that travelers tend to be the easiest people to make friends with. Do you
Definitely.
agree?
Yeah, absolutely. For sure.
Yeah, and then meeting those people creates new experiences later down the road or connections. So
Mhm.
maybe when you plan to move somewhere, you reach out to somebody that you met in some random country who's from that place, and
Mhm.
you say, "Hey, I'm planning to visit here. Do you know anybody that I can connect with who's currently living there? Or what tips do you have for me?" And more than likely, they're going to hit you with their best shot, right?
Yeah.
They're going to give you all the gold. And then, so it's just making those connections. And then social media makes it so easy
Yeah.
to just reach out to people you've met along the way
Yeah.
that can help you.
Absolutely.
That's so freeing, is that we just
It
have at
is.
our
Yeah.
fingertips all this knowledge and connections with people so easily, right? Like,
Yeah.
because when I moved to Hawaii, I didn't know anyone. I had never even been to visit. I just thought, hey, no one's ever said bad things about Hawaii. I should just buy a one-way ticket, and if I don't like it, I can always have just a nice long vacation. I don't need to
Exactly.
stay forever, and I ended up staying for 6 years. Yeah, I just started telling people. That was kind of my first pre-step, was telling people, "Yeah, I'm thinking about moving to Hawaii." And when
Mhm.
they hear that, they're like, "Oh, that's amazing. Well, I actually know someone there." Not too many people take these risks,
Mhm.
and when they hear somebody who is going to take a risk, they help make the connections without even asking. Sometimes
Mhm.
you don't even have to ask people, it just all happens. But I think that's part of the whatever happens is meant to
Mhm.
be in the open doors. So if people keep lining things up for you, it might be a sign, you
And
know?
and I love that you're doing this podcast, Heather, because I think that when people see other people doing something, they start thinking to themselves, "Oh, this is possible. I'm going to do this." So, like moving to Mexico, our friends from Seattle had done that back in November, and I was like, "Well, why can't we do that?" And we are so lucky, because you're right. When you moved to Hawaii, when I moved to Seattle, we didn't have the resources as much as we do now, with these Facebook groups, with this ability to work from anywhere, digitally. And it's really incredible to think that our parents, a generation before us, did not have the opportunities that we have today to earn income by just being online, right? And to inspire people by being online. And it's just, I mean, that alone is so freeing. And Sasha and I have every night that we've been here had to pinch ourselves because we're like, are we really living this fairy tale life? We are so incredibly lucky and grateful for this opportunity, and now we're trying to figure out how can we make this work more long term. And I'm a firm believer in, if you are wanting something, put it out there in the universe, tell people, write it down, put it on Facebook, and that will make you more accountable to achieving that. And so I'm going to say this right now, our goal, our long-term goal and short-term goal really is, we would like to have a family. So we are hoping to maybe get pregnant this year. I'm going to take out that word maybe. That's a very passive word. We are hoping to get pregnant this year.
Yes.
And when we have a baby, we are wanting to continue this nomadic lifestyle and show them the world. We want to live abroad. We don't want to have a home in any one location. We want to have maybe a home base and then places that we live longer term throughout the year.
I love that. I'm in full support of that idea. I know in our culture, especially in America, people define success as owning a home,
Mhm.
having a family, driving a nice car, living in a nice location, all these things, but they're just things.
Mhm.
So, how do you define success? Because I think it can be defined in very different ways. And for some people, those things are replaced with experiences.
Yeah.
So, what's your definition of success?
That's such a great question. And what you said reminded me of this quote. It's like, stop buying things you don't need to impress people you don't like. Like, those things just end up owning you, right? I would
Mhm.
define success as achieving and realizing your dream, whatever it is. And my husband is an entrepreneur, he's a business owner. He has worked his bum off for 6 years to get the business to what it is today. And I'm so proud of him. And I'm so lucky to have been a part of that success over the last year and growing the business and hiring the amazing team members that we have now. But success, I think, is just being intrinsically happy in your own skin and being confident in whatever it is that you're doing. And I also think that I see a person as successful when they have the ability to inspire others in a positive way. That's really huge. I'm with you, Heather. I don't view success as a cushy job climbing the corporate ladder and owning this huge home. Unless that intrinsically makes that person happy, wonderful. Then that is success for them, and that's completely okay. But I think that we need to revisit this model of what success looks like in our society. And this is just, I think our generation is the first one to sort of pave the way of a new definition of happiness, and that is freedom.
Yeah, so true. It looks so different for so many people, and it's
Hmm.
just what it is that's making them happy. And I don't know, did I ask you at the beginning what were some of your biggest fears before you pulled the trigger in going to Seattle?
Yeah, fears. That's such a good question. It's so funny. My fears have kind of morphed over time because what I used to be afraid of, I'm not anymore because
Yeah, you've conquered
I've
it.
had so much life experience, and I'm like, "Oh,
Exactly.
I made it. It's okay."
Yes, yes.
I would
You survived, right?
Yes,
And it brought you to the next thing that you've already experienced that and you've got
right.
that's like in your tool belt or in your like
Exactly.
arsenal.
And I've not only survived, I've thrived through this,
Mm,
and that's such an important thing to note. I would say that nothing is permanent. Life is all about impermanence. It's about transience. And in some of the most difficult challenges that I've faced in my life personally, anxiety being one of them, crippling anxiety in Seattle for a few years that came out of nowhere. I would say nothing is permanent. You cannot sustain that level of fear and unhappiness for so long. Do something about it. Get the help. Do some yoga, whatever it is that gets you out of your funk. Nothing will be forever when it comes to a fear or something that's scary, right? You're always going to get past that, and you're going to get to the next place, the next space in your life. So I would say a fear that I had was not being able to go back. meaning like, what if I hate it in Seattle? Okay, I could always go back to Hawaii. It's not going to be the same because I'm a changed person, but you're never stuck. If you don't like your job, figure out how you can leave it. Figure out how you can make money a different way. Figure out how create your own happiness. You are the master of your life. And it's
Yeah,
always
that's
okay to start over. You can start over anytime. You can push that reset button. And that's what I love about living abroad is, we can rent like a super luxury apartment for 1 month and be like, okay, that was great. Now let's tone it back a little bit and let's kind of start over next month. Let's go to somewhere new and maybe spend less on an apartment and more on tacos.
more on tacos always. Yeah, that's so true. Is that if it's that easy to make the move, it can be that easy to make the move back if it
Mhm.
doesn't work, or
Right.
to make the move to somewhere new that might even be a better fit for you.
Mhm.
So, yeah, not being stuck. So, right now in this new journey where you're working and living abroad in Mexico and planning a family, and down the road, now that you've conquered some of those fears that you used to have and just are more confident, what sort of fears do you have now? Do you still have fears, or do you look at them
Of
in a different
course.
way?
Yes. Yeah. I used to joke and say I'm scared of everything. I'm definitely like I admire you so much in this, Heather, because you are so fearless about everything. And I don't know, I think my biggest fear in life now is losing my partner, is losing Sasha, and it's such an irrational fear. But I think that just being so close with him and having such a special bond, I just can't imagine life without him, and I that will never happen. But yeah, just something happening to maybe to family or to friends is a fear of mine. So yeah, we fear what we can't control, right? That's human nature. But that's something that I've learned to overcome, because if you can't control it, then just let it be. It's going to work out fine.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, to hear you say that just makes me so happy. This is not the same Lisa that I used to be friends with in Hawaii.
Well,
Look
and
at you.
and isn't that a beautiful thing that we can be
It's so
such good friends
beautiful.
with somebody and watch them grow and be parallel with them along their journey? And I have watched you grow, Heather, as well, so much. And I'm so proud of the person you have become today. And I'm so honored to be your first guest on your podcast. And I'm just going to say this: you are going to have thousands of followers within the first few months. I know it.
Oh, thanks, Lisa. You've always been my biggest fan, one of them. Well,
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for the path that my life has taken me on, the choices that I've made to get me on that path, and the people that I've come across on that path. And I think once we find those people that make us happy and you just have that instant connection with, even if you don't live in the same place, it's so easy to stay in touch with them and
Mhm.
just keeping them a part of your life, because all those people and all their experiences create this strong community that you have these resources to lean on. I have a resource to lean on if I ever want to move to Mexico and work abroad. I can just call you, or if I want to go on a long-term trip, read your blog or call you and find out some different tips that you have, places that you think I should visit. I think that's super important for people just to remember that people come and people go, but
Mhm.
having their experiences is just, what's the word? Priceless.
I was
Yeah,
gonna say enriching. Yeah, and
that
I
too.
and I love sharing travel with people. So for any of you listeners, if you want to check out my blog, it's culturalfoodies.com, and I've got lots of content on all the various places that we've been around the world, and it's just a passion of mine to share photography and writing with the world.
Yeah, Lisa takes beautiful photos,
Oh,
beautiful.
thank you, Heather.
She is also in many beautiful photos as well. So I think she either Sasha is a natural born photographer or she's a really
I've
great
had to teach
teacher.
him a little bit.
Yeah.
Instagram husband.
Yes, I love that. So, Lisa, before we wrap up here, oh, and by the way, I'll put all your details in the show notes. So the blog that she just mentioned will be down there. But before we wrap up, if you hadn't have moved to Seattle, what do you think your life would be like? If you hadn't have taken that risk to just say, I want to chase my dreams and chase the mountains, what do you think your life would look like? What kind of
Oh my
regrets do you
goodness.
think you would have?
I would be a very different person. I have grown tremendously in the past few years because of these scary changes that I've made and that have introduced themselves into my life. I don't know where I'd be. I'd probably still be living in Hawaii.
Living in paradise.
Right, which is fine, but, yeah, my mind would be a lot smaller than it is now. My
Hmm.
confidence would be a lot smaller than it is now, so I'm just very grateful for these experiences in my life, and I would like to leave the listeners with a quote that I actually saw on a kombucha bottle last weekend in Oaxaca, and and that
Wise words from kombucha.
yes, and those words are, it's in Spanish, I'll translate it. It's no sueñes tu vida, viva tu sueño. And that means don't dream your life, live your dream. And that has become my new life motto.
That is perfect. And can you say it one more time in Espanol?
Yes, no sueñes tu vida, viva tu sueño. Actually, I
So
think it's
beautiful.
vive tu sueño.
So don't, what is it
Yeah, don't
translated
dream
again?
your life, live your dream.
Mm. But it is also important to dream in life. Don't forget that.
Absolutely, absolutely. But then
Yes.
do something about it.
Yes, exactly. Take that small step. Oh my gosh, Lisa, this has been so much fun. Thank you for
I
being my first episode. Oh, this couldn't have been any better.
know. Oh.
And yeah, so Lisa has a travel blog called culturalfoodies.com. She puts beautiful pictures up there and gives tips on different places. She's a foodie. She's going to tell you where to eat in the coolest spots. And she is so practical that all her blogs are inspiring and helpful for others. It's not just a travel journal. So love that. Check her out there. She's also on Instagram at Cultural Foodies and then also on Pinterest,
Yes.
Cultural Foodies. So
And the
those will be in the show notes.
Instagram is cultural_foodies.
Perfect. Lisa, I'm so grateful for knowing you and having you as such a close friend in my life. And I just love seeing how free you are and
Oh,
how fearless you are. So thank you for being on the Fearless and Free podcast.
oh, an honor. Thank you so much for hosting me, Heather.
Well, I'm sure I'll have you back because you've done so many other things that require taking risks that I want to dive into again. And it's just so fun to talk to you. So
Oh,
thanks again. And listeners, check Lisa out.
thanks, Heather.